Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum class. Welcome to English grade 8 video lessons. Students, for English grade 8, we are on unit number 6 and today we are going to cover SLO from writing competency. Now, let's read our SLO. It says I before E except after C. Rule with exceptions. And the other SLO that we have merged in this lesson is about writing a poem, narrating an event. So we have to write a narrative poem where we narrate something. It's like a story or an event, but it has to be in a narrative style. And the first one, here we have a spelling rule, which we call, using a mnemonic, we call it I before E except after C, because this is very easy to remember. This is how you memorize this rule of spelling, I before E except after C. We will understand this rule and also we will see some exceptions, because in English, if there is a rule, it may come with an exception and you have to learn and understand them as well in order to write correct spellings. So spelling rule and also a poem in narrative style, or a narrative poem that is narrating an event. This is what we are going to do today. Here is a vertical linkage, and let's move on to our brainstorming session today. Students, before we begin the lesson, I want you to think of these two prompts that you can see on the screen. Think about words that have the EI diaphragm or IE sound. Can you come up with words that are having this pattern or this group of alphabets or letters? I hope that you can do it. And can you come up with examples that follow the I before E rule? Now, this is what we are going to learn, but first I want you to name the words that are having the IE or EI spellings, or write them down. Good. Now let's move on to our main lesson. Let's understand the spelling rules. And today we have just one rule with exceptions. You can open your books and see that the I before E except after C, this rule is used to help remember the spelling pattern of certain words in the English language, so that we do not confuse it and write incorrect spellings. That's why we are learning this rule. It suggests that when the letter combination IE is used in a word, I should generally come before the letter E in words, unless the letters are part of the C and I combination. Then you are going to see some exceptions. However, there are exceptions and additional considerations to be aware of. Yes. First, I will always come before E, but when you have it after the letter C, then they will be reversed. They will be EI. But there are some exceptions. Let's go through the exceptions. For example, the letter IE after C. Here you can see that after the letter C, not EI but IE is coming. This is breaking our rule. So this is an exception. All right. Similarly, in the word science, sufficient, society, you can see that even after the C letter, we have not EI but IE. Now, here you can see the second exception. This is exception 1. This is our exception number 2. EI not preceded by C. For example, the rule says that EI will come only after the letter C. But here you can see there is no letter C available in seize or vain, weird or heist, there, feisty, foreign, protein. Still, we are using the pattern EI because this is an exception. We don't have any letter C over here. So we are learning a rule, but we are also learning some exceptions. Let's see how the rule is working. Let's put it into practice. So here you can see that the basic rule is of I before E except the letter except after C, this is how it works. In words where the IE combination creates the long E sound, then the I comes before E unless it follows the letter C. For example, achieve. Yes, we will write IE, not EI, because we don't have any C letter over here. Achieve, believe, peace, receive. Now here you can see that IE does not come, rather EI comes because it is after the letter C. So this is an exception, and this is how I before E except after C works. Sealing, same. Receipt, same. You have EI after C. Here you just have IE because there is no C available. Now, let's look at some examples, some exceptions of the rule does not apply if the IE combination makes a different sound as seen in words like science or efficient. C and I combinations where the IE follows C are exceptions to the rule. These combinations often make a different sound. For example, science, efficient, species. Now, students, now that we have learned the spelling rule, let's also discuss about the sounds. For example, in words where the IE combination comes, we make the long E sound. E sound, which is a long vowel sound. Let's practice. Achieve, believe, peace. Can you hear the long vowel? Receive, sealing, receipt. Yes. Now, but when there is C, and here are some exceptions, then you will not say science, you will say science, efficient, species. Only when it is following the basic rule of I before E except after C, then the long E sound, the long vowel sound will come in your pronunciation. But if it is in the exception, then you cannot prolong the vowels, but you will say it immediately without lengthening the vowel sound. Now, let's look at some very important thing that you need to know, which you can see in the book. Here you have to keep in mind that English spelling can be unpredictable and there are exceptions and irregularities. Yes, this is how the English language works. You learn a rule, then you have to learn the exception, or you have to break the rule as well in some cases. It means English language spellings are unpredictable. You cannot predict them. You cannot apply one rule to everything, and you have to look at exceptions and irregularities. To remember the rules and exceptions, mnemonic devices. Now, as I told you in the start, that this is a mnemonic. Mnemonics are sentences or words that we use for our memory. I before E except after C. It rhymes, right? This is rhyming because it's a mnemonic. Or, now, what is the exception? Neighbor. We have EI, but we don't have any C letter. Still, we are using the pattern of EI. This is an exception. In the word way, we are having this EI pattern. We don't have any C letter, but still we are using EI pattern. So you can see that we learn a rule and then we learn the exceptions. Now, here is an activity that you want to do in order to practice your spelling rule. Let's see. Here is all the words that you can use: deceive, sealing, neighbor, peace, and science. I find it fascinating how the field of science, yes, continues to advance. Now, is this word science following the basic rule? No, this is not following I before E except after C rule. Next one. In our living room is beautifully decorated. What are we talking about? Ceiling. Yes. Is it following the rule? Yes, this word is clearly following the rule of I before E except the letter C. It is important to always tell the truth and not to deceive others. Deceive. E-I-V-E. Now, is it following the rule? Yes, it is following our rule of I before E except after C. My next door neighbor, N-E-I-G-H-B-O-U-R. Is it following the rule? No, this is not following our spelling rule because this is an exception. She carefully assembled each piece. Is it following the exception? Yes, it is following it because C comes way after. So this is also following our spelling rules. Now, if you're confused about writing the spelling where, which is a pronoun, or receive, deceive, you can easily follow the I before E except after C rule and write the correct spellings. That's why we are learning this rule. But in some cases, we have some exceptions which you also want to learn, like the word neighbor or way, etc., or science. Now, after learning about this, let's move on to the second SLO that we have merged. You are supposed to write a narrative poem. The main lesson, The Most Beautiful Flower, itself is a narrative poem. Here are two narrative poems that you can see, and you can find a story, a narration in it of an event. You can see these two simulation links, one for writing a narrative poem and one for the I before E except after C rule that you need to watch and learn more about them. This is your homework where you have to write a narrative poem according to this instruction given below, and all you have to do is read a lot of narrative poems, read the main lessons poem again, which is also a narrative poem, and then write a narrative poem by yourself, because we are talking about the writing competency. This is your worksheet where you have to solve the worksheet of I before E except after C rule, and all these resources are attached. Now, for the narrative poem, the homework is enough. There's no worksheet. You are just supposed to write a narrative poem. It has to be in a sequence. You can narrate a story in it, any personal experience or anything fictional as well. Thank you so much, my dear learners. Take care of yourselves. Allah Hafiz.